This podcast was produced using artificial intelligence and refined by human editors.
Welcome to another episode of Travel with Lara and Luca, the globe-trotting podcast, where your ears take you on a journey and your imagination does the rest. I'm Luca, your fellow traveler on this auditory adventure.
And I'm Lara. We are your pilot and co-pilot navigating the skies of storytelling and the seas of historical curiosity. Today, we've landed in the heart of Europe. Welcome to Prague, known to locals by its beautiful Czech name, Praha.
Ah, the city of 100 spires, where every cobblestone seems to whisper a different tale from centuries past. Lara, do you remember the first time your feet graced these storied streets?
Absolutely. It was a crisp autumn morning, leaves painting the paths in gold and auburn. The air was filled with the aroma of roasted chestnuts, and I felt like I stepped into a different era, Luca.
Mine was a summer's twilight, when the glow of the lamps joined the stars above, casting an ethereal ambiance. It was a night when the poetry of Prague really got under my skin.
It's remarkable how this city captures the heart. So, Luca, what magical sights are on our metaphorical map today?
Oh, Lara, we have vistas and bites, tales and trails that await. From the mighty Prague Castle, perched like a regal bird above the Vltava River, to the legends that dance around the ancient stones of the Charles Bridge.
Not forgetting the delicious traditional dishes that will have our listeners' mouths watering, and we might even let you in on where to find the best trdelník, that sugary, sweet, doughy delight.
Can't wait for that. But we won't be sticking to only the beaten path today. We'll share some hidden gems that even the savviest of Prague explorers might not know.
And when we say gems, we do mean real treasure. Prague's got hidden courtyards, clandestine cafes, and even whispers of a secret alchemist's alley. But you didn't hear that from me.
Mum's the word, Lara. Now, if you thought Prague was all postcard prettiness, brace yourself for the weird and wonderful facts that will make your eyebrows climb up your forehead.
But we promise no endless lists of dates and dusty history lessons here. We'll weave through centuries of intriguing stories that paint the city in every color imaginable.
And of course, we'll share expert travel tips that could only come from two people who have stumbled upon every cobblestone and befriended every alley cat in the city.
They know the best secrets, after all. Oh, and let's not overlook the exciting day trips for those itching to step beyond Prague's borders, like the green unfurling scrolls of Bohemian paradise.
I can feel the wanderlust stirring already. But before we get lost in the arcana of our next segments, let's pull out our telescopes and peer into what's on the horizon. Lara, what's first on our intrepid itinerary?
First up, we'll be scaling the heights and delving into the depths of Prague's most iconic sites. If you've ever wanted to stand sentry on a castle tower or whisper secrets in the ear of a saint on the Charles Bridge, you won't want to miss this.
And after that, we'll give our listeners just a taste, a teaser, if you will, of the scrumptious segment to follow. Prague is as much a city of flavors as it is of sights, and we'll get into that delectable discussion soon.
But for now, saddle up, fellow wanderers. Whether you are clutching a coffee in a bustling city or lounging, book in hand, in the quiet burbs, let the spires of Prague beckon you into a world of old Bohemian beauty.
You're in for a treat, dear listeners, as we unravel the tales woven into the golden tapestry of Prague. This is Travel with Lara and Luca, and our journey begins now. Welcome back, wanderers. After that brief introduction, we are diving straight into the iconic sights of Prague for our first segment. Are you ready to walk down the cobbled lanes of history with us?
Prague is such a treasure trove of sights. Luca, I'd say it's practically impossible to tire of exploring them. Each step is a story.
Couldn't agree more, Lara. Let's kick off with the granddaddy of them all, Prague Castle. You know, it's like a little city all by itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's massive. You need a good pair of shoes because there's so much to see, from the Gothic St. Vitus Cathedral to the lush royal garden.
And what about the changing of the guard ceremony? It's like this intricate dance of precision and history all woven together.
It's definitely a must-see. But Luca, have you ever wondered why they never seem to change the uniforms to something a bit more breezy? That can't be comfortable in the Prague summer.
Comfort is overrated when it comes to tradition, Lara. Now, let's stroll down to one of the oldest functioning bridges in the world, Charles Bridge.
Magic at dawn, Luca. That place has a life of its own when the mist cloaks the statues, and the only souls are the early birds, both human and feathered.
And speaking of statues, don't you just love the legend of St. John of Nepomuk? Tossed into the river below because he wouldn't spill Queen Johanna's confession secrets.
I love that we can touch his statue for good luck. Although I have to say, Luca, if I were to be a statue on that bridge, I'd pick the warrior Brunkvik, sword held high, ready for adventure.
While I admire your spirit, I'd go with likeness over legacy and choose that pensive guy, philosopher Vincent of Ferrara. You've seen the one, pondering the passing Vltava beneath him.
From one pondering statue to another kind of observer, let's tick-tock over to the astronomical clock. Luca, you're a fan of timepieces. Tell us why this clock is so special.
Well, for one, it's been ticking since 1410, which in itself is astonishing. But the real beauty is in the details, the zodiac ring, the calendar dial, and of course the hourly show of figures that never fails to draw a crowd.
And what a crowd! My tip for our travelers, stand off to the side to watch the show and observe the onlookers. It's people watching gold.
Time flies though, so let's mosey over to one of Prague's most famous squares. Old Town Square, Lara, is practically an open-air museum.
It is. From the twin spires of Teen Church to the Art Nouveau splendor of the Municipal House, there's something for everyone to gawk at.
Don't forget the Easter and Christmas markets. Lara, I remember you sent me a picture of you sipping svajak and looking holly jolly one Christmas.
Guilty as charged, it's the mulled wine, Luca. They brew it with a dash of Christmas spirit.
Speaking of the Christmas spirit, how about we give our listeners a little tease of what's coming up next after our iconic sights?
They'll want to stay tuned as we'll whet their appetites discussing the delicious cuisine of Prague. Think hearty, flavorful, and yes, we will talk about beer.
But before we leave these cobbles behind, let's share just one more facet of our favorite sights. I'm thinking we should talk about those hidden, intricate passageways.
Ah, the network of alleys! You turn off from the main trail and stumble into a courtyard that looks like it hasn't changed since the Renaissance.
I always feel like I've discovered a secret. In the heart of a bustling city, these pockets of tranquility, like finding another world.
There's just something about standing where countless others have stood before, yet it feels like it's your very own discovery.
That's what travel's about, right? Personal discoveries, shared stories.
Exactly. And dear listeners, we'll be sharing plenty more as we continue. So bear with us as these tales and towering spires give way to the tales and tastes of Czech cuisine.
I can almost smell the goulash in the air, Lara. So grab your forks and your appetite for our next segment on delicious Czech cuisine.
Welcome back, fellow travelers. You're listening to Travel with Lara and Luca, and if your mouth isn't already watering, get ready for it.
Oh yes, we're diving into the delectable side of Prague now, Czech cuisine. You know, Lara, some say that the way to truly understand a city is through its food.
They're not wrong, Luca. And when it comes to Czech food, it's hearty, it's rich, and it's absolutely soul-warming.
Speaking of hearty, let's start with goulash. Yes, I know, many think of Hungary first, but the Czechs have their own marvelous take on this stew.
Definitely, Luca. You'll find it served with bread or these beautiful fluffy dumplings called nedlíky. The Czechs don't mess around with portions, do they?
Not at all, but that's what you need after a long day of exploring. I remember this one time, after walking up to Prague Castle, I was starving, and that bowl of goulash was like a warm hug.
A warm hug with a beefy handshake.
Absolutely. But we can't talk about Czech dishes without mentioning svíčková, the creamy vegetable sauce, the tenderloin. I dream about this dish.
And don't forget the cranberry compote they add on top. It's that perfect blend of savory and slightly sweet. Remember the first time we tried it?
How could I forget? You were so skeptical of the cream and cranberries combo.
I was. But one bite, and I was a believer. And hey, the Czech Republic is the birthplace of Pilsner, so naturally we have to talk about the beer, right?
Oh, we must. Czechs take their beer seriously, and rightly so. The country has been perfecting it for centuries. Pilsner Urquell, Budvar.
Staropramen. Here's a fun fact. the Czech Republic has the highest beer consumption per capita in the world.
No surprise there. But did you know many places will have their own house beer that you can't find anywhere else?
That's when you know you've stumbled upon something special. I remember us trying that dark lager at that tiny brewery in the old town.
You mean that pub where we ended up singing Czech folk songs with the locals?
That's the one. But Czech food isn't just about the heavy hitters. It's also about the snacks, especially the street food.
Ah, yes. Let's talk about Trdelník. It's hard to miss those stalls with spirals of dough roasting over open flames.
So irresistible with their cinnamon sugar coating. Though they're not historically Czech, they've pretty much become a staple in Prague's tourist spots.
Absolutely. Watching it being made is part of the magic. Remember that time we had one filled with ice cream?
Who could forget? It was a chilly day, but we didn't care. We just had to try it, and oh, was it worth it?
But if we're going to highlight the sweet side of Prague, we need to mention the palatchinky.
Czech pancakes, they're thinner, more like the French crepes, and you can have them with fruit, jam, or Nutella.
And talking about sweet, let's not forget about the coffee culture.
Absolutely a throwback to the days of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Café Louvre was once frequented by the likes of Kafka and Einstein.
Can you imagine having your morning coffee in the same spot Kafka might have pondered over his existential angst?
That definitely adds a different flavor to your latte.
And just like their beer, the Czechs have a particular love for their cafes, which blend that deep-rooted history with a modern touch.
Indeed, it's not just a cup of coffee, it's an experience. A step back into Prague's intellectual legacy.
Every sip tells a story. Ah, look at us, Lara. What a poetic journey we're on, from hearty stews to liquid legacies.
That's the beauty of this city, Luca. It feeds your belly and your soul.
And we could talk about Czech cuisine all day, but we have to move on.
That's right. Next up, we're uncovering Prague's hidden gems. And believe me, there are corners of this city that even the locals are still discovering.
Oh, are we going to talk about...
Hush, Luca, no spoilers. But yes, that's a promise of what's to come after a quick imaginary stroll down the Vltava.
Hidden gems of Prague. You know, Lara, it's kind of a paradoxical term for a city so thoroughly explored as Prague.
Couldn't agree more, Luca. But you know what's amazing? Even after living here for years, I still stumble upon hidden courtyards or tiny galleries that remind me Prague keeps its secrets close.
Yes, like Kampa Island. Nestled right in the shadow of the Charles Bridge with its lush greenery and the soothing sound of water, it never ceases to surprise.
And what about the Lenin Wall? You think it's just another wall filled with graffiti, but then you learn about its poignantly rebellious past and connection to John Lennon.
I have to admit, Lara, I love that wall. It's this alive, bold testament to free speech. And the layers of paint, each layer a new declaration of peace or protest.
It keeps evolving, sort of like how every visit to Prague can offer something different, even when you think you've seen it all.
Speaking of evolving, have you been to the Vrtbovská garden? Not only is it a stunning Baroque garden, but it's also perfectly hidden away on Petrin Hill.
I have. Those terraced gardens are like ascending into a secret paradise. And the view, Luca, it's like all of Prague is just sprawled out before you.
Every time I'm there, I half expect to bump into a soiree of 18th century poets and philosophers, maybe even Kafka lurking in a corner.
Now that would be something. But let's not forget about wandering down the lesser-known streets and alleys. There's Široká Street in the Jewish Quarter, which isn't just wide, it's ripe with stories.
Absolutely, each building there has a history, a soul of its own. And what about those little alleys around the Old Town Hall? Easy to miss, but they're packed with charm.
It's all about getting lost, right? Sometimes I'll pick a direction and just go like through the tiny golden lane with its colorful tiny houses. It's magical.
Though, I must confess, I've got a soft spot for the art within the quieter neighborhoods like Žižkov. Not touristy, just raw and real Prague life.
Žižkov, with the TV tower and those creepy crawling baby statues by, you guessed it, David Černý.
Those babies, they give me the heebie-jeebies, Lara, but they're quintessentially his style, provocative, unexpected, and amazing conversation starters.
And amidst the talking babies, you can't miss the opportunity to pop into a local pub or hospoda and just breathe in the atmosphere.
You'll get a taste of the neighborhood that way, won't you? The beer's cheaper and the banter's richer.
Not to mention, you might stumble upon some hole-in-the-wall art gallery or indie theater. There's a whole underground art scene that doesn't get the international spotlight it deserves.
Now, if we're talking hidden gems, we can't leave out the museums and galleries off the beaten path, like the Kampa Museum or the fascinating Museum of Alchemists and Magicians of Old Prague.
The Museum of Alchemists. That's where history turns into legend. You'll get a serious case of the what-ifs exploring those old alchemical labs.
I always leave feeling like I've potentially missed out on discovering the Philosopher's Stone, every alchemist's dream.
And just when you think you've seen all the secret spots, Prague reveals another mystery. Like the Žižkov television tower. It's got those babies climbing it, but the inside is a modern art gallery.
Plus, that observation deck is a must. What, 216 meters high? Those views can compete with Petrin Lookout Tower any day.
Speaking of views, let's end on one of my personal favorites, the Strav Monastery Library. That's where you can find mysterious old tomes and globes. It's something out of a fantasy novel.
That library really is a treasure trove. Sometimes I wish the books could talk and tell us their stories, but alas, we have to make do with their whispers.
And with that poetic thought, we slide to the end of our journey through Prague's less celebrated marvels. But the magic doesn't stop there.
That's right, Lara. Listeners should stay tuned, because in the next segment, we're going to reveal the must-see iconic places of Prague, the heart of the city's splendor and grandeur.
Brace yourselves, because we've got some majestic sights in store. But until then, keep seeking out the unexplored alleys and silent stories.
In a city like Prague, the more you look, the more you find. And isn't that the best part of traveling?
Exactly. We'll see you soon to explore more of this Bohemian wonderland.
Buckle up, listeners. In this segment of Travel with Lara and Luca, we're unraveling the magic of Prague's must-see places.
Ah, the heartbeats of the city. You know, Luca, Prague has this unique way of making every step on its cobbled streets feel like you're walking through the pages of a storybook.
So true, Lara. And speaking of storybook settings, let's start with the lesser-known side of the river, Malá Strana, or as the Romantics like to call it, the Lesser Town.
It gets a lesser in the name, but believe me, there's nothing lesser about it. Every Baroque building in Malá Strana tells its own tale. I still remember the whimsical frescoes that seem almost ready to step out and greet you.
And the stories they could tell. Imagine the palace intrigues and whispered secrets overheard by those very walls.
Perhaps they'd gossip about the nobility that used to roam these streets, or maybe chat about the spires of St. Nicholas Church playing catch with the sunlight.
Ooh, a poetic image, Lara. Now from the poetic to the panoramic, let's climb up to Vyšehrad. It's got some of the most impressive views of the city.
Vyšehrad is a fortress full of legends. There's the one about Libuše, the prophetic duchess who foresaw the glory of Prague. I like to sit on the battlements and just imagine the past unfolding before me.
Right? You can almost hear the clash of swords and the echoes of ancient kings. And the cemetery there, it's like a who's who of Czech history.
From one architectural wonder to the polar opposite. How about shaking things up with the dancing house, Luca?
Ah, the Fred and Ginger of buildings. Lara, remember when we first saw it? That deconstructivist architecture had us arguing. Is it daring or is it jarring?
Both. That's the beauty of it. It's as if the buildings are swaying to a melody only they can hear. A bold contrast to the Gothic and Baroque styles elsewhere in Prague.
And speaking of hidden melodies, let's meander over to Petrin Hill. Can you tell our listeners about that gem?
With pleasure. Petrin is like an oasis in the city, isn't it? Especially in spring with those blooming cherry trees.
There's something so timeless about it. You take the funicular up, and Prague spreads below like a banquet of history.
And at the top, we've got the Petrin Lookout Tower, Prague's answer to the Eiffel Tower. Though I think it's more charming, dare I say, even romantic.
Definitely romantic, Lara. But what's next on our whirlwind tour?
I'm thinking, Luca, we need to wade into the weird and wonderful side of Prague next. Get ready for some truly odd tales.
Ooh, I can't wait. From enchanting gardens to dancing architecture, Prague's must-see places are just a few steps from the beaten path. And if you thought the iconic places were fascinating, just wait until we dive into the city's weirdest facts. And now, let's stray off the beaten path and delve into something a bit more unusual. It's time for Weird Facts. I can't wait to get into these, Lara.
Ah, the quirky side of Prague. It's honestly one of my favorite segments, brewing with oddities and curiosities. So, Luca, kick us off with one of those bizarre traditions you've mentioned before.
You mean the Easter whippings? Quite the startling tradition for unsuspecting foreigners. The Monday after Easter Sunday, men go about playfully whipping women with decorated willow branches to ensure their health and beauty for the upcoming year. Strange, yet well-intentioned.
Cultural practices are wild, aren't they? And speaking of wild, let's talk about the burning of the Witches' Night, or Čarodějnice, on April 30th. It's this ancient tradition where Praguers build huge bonfires to burn effigies of witches, symbolizing the end of winter. It's pretty intense, but also quite the spectacle.
Oh yes, it's all about warding off evil spirits. And you know, there's no shortage of spectacle when it comes to Prague's statuary. Like those babies with slot machine faces by David Černý crawling up the Žižkov TV tower. Eerie, yet compelling, don't you think?
They're impossible to ignore. That's David Černý for you, Prague's enfant terrible of art. And let's not forget his piss sculpture, where two male figures, relieve themselves in a pool shaped like the Czech Republic.
Art, or just a bold statement? Well, that's Prague for you. And speaking of peculiar things, you've heard about that law against using segways in the historical center?
Oh, the Segway ban? Totally understandable, though. The narrow, cobbled streets were definitely not designed for 21st century two-wheelers. The ban's completely appreciated when you're not constantly dodging tourists on wheels.
No dodging necessary, unless we're talking about the ghosts that lurk around every corner. Did you know there's an entire tour dedicated to Prague's ghost stories and urban legends?
Is this where we talk about the headless horseman supposedly seen in the Old Town, or the golem that once roamed Gozefov?
Just so. And that's not even mentioning the spirits at the Daliborka Tower at Prague Castle. The tower's named after the knight Dalibor of Kozojedy, who, according to legend, learned to play the violin in that very cell. The music was said to be so enchanting that people would gather around just to listen.
Enchanting, yet tragic. Prague's undercurrent of mystery never seems to end. But sometimes, the weird facts aren't supernatural at all, like the quirky bylaws. Did you know that it's technically illegal to bring potatoes into the city from Poland?
Laugh. That one always cracks me up, a carryover from times when contraband spuds were a serious economic concern. But let's not get into trouble with potato smugglers, lest we peel away from the point. What we can talk about, though, is how the Charles Bridge has always been shrouded in superstition.
Oh, the magical laying of the bridge's foundation stone, right? They say Charles IV insisted on placing the first stone himself at precisely 5:31 a.m. on the 9th of July, 1357, because he was deeply into numerology. The alignment of odd numbers was supposed to give the structure extra strength.
And just a little numerology fact for our listeners. If you write the date and time as a numerical sequence, it reads 135797531. Just a fun tidbit of Charles' penchant for mystical numbers.
Clearly, the oddities in Prague's history just add to its charm. The city knows how to blend the eerie with the artful.
So true, Lara. And speaking of charm, let's not forget where that history has brought us. Our next segment is all about Prague's rich history, and believe us when we say, we have tales to tell that will transport you through time.
From the Premyslids to the Habsburgs, revolutions to rebirths, Prague has seen it all and stands as a breathtaking testament to the power of history.
So join us as we turn back the clocks and stroll through the ages, uncovering the stories woven into the very cobblestones of the city streets. But that's for after the break. So here we are, diving into the rich tapestry that is Prague's history. A city that has seen empires rise and fall, been the heart of Bohemia and the capital of the Holy Roman Empire.
Absolutely, Luca. I mean, can you imagine walking the same streets as the kings and emperors of old? And speaking of emperors, let's start with the man, the legend, Charles IV.
Ah, Charles IV, a king so beloved he's got a bridge, a university, even a whole section of the city named after him.
Yes, and don't forget he founded the new town in 1348. The thing about Charles was that he made Prague into a cultural and political hub of Central Europe.
True story, Lara. He was also responsible for the St. Vitus Cathedral, which took, a casual 6 centuries to complete.
Talk about never getting to see your building projects finished, huh? Now let's wind the clocks forward to the time of the Habsburgs and the creation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Oh, the Habsburg era brought a whole different flavor to Prague. Take Rudolf II, for example. The man turned Prague Castle into a Renaissance wonderland.
Renaissance wonderland and a hotbed for alchemists, Prague was the place where science and the occult were in a cauldron of innovation.
Speaking of cauldrons, Prague has seen its fair share of conflict, like in 1618, when the famous Second Defenestration of Prague kicked off the 30 Years' War.
You've got to respect a city where defenestration is such a common problem. They have to number them.
Indeed. But fast forward to the modern era, Prague was at the epicenter of events like World War I, the establishment of Czechoslovakia, World War II, and then the crushing grip of communism.
Each of those periods has left an indelible mark on Prague's identity. For instance, the Art Nouveau movement has beautified the city with stunning buildings like the Municipal House.
While Prague was relatively lucky to escape the worst of World War II's destruction, the scars of the communist regime are still visible today if you know where to look.
And when we talk about visible scars, we must talk about the Prague Spring of 1968. A brief period of liberalization that was crushed by the Soviet invasion.
That event really resonates with me, Lara. It symbolized the Czech people's resilient spirit, a desire for freedom that just couldn't be extinguished, leading us to the Velvet Revolution in 1989.
Exactly, Luca. The Velvet Revolution, a peaceful protest that led to the end of communist rule. And what's incredible is how the name evokes the smooth way in which it transpired.
And the man of the hour was Václav Havel, playwright, dissenter, and eventually president. He's a symbol of the city's journey to democracy.
Prague's history isn't just about the grand narratives, though. It's also in the small, everyday moments of the people.
That's beautifully put, Lara. The street art, the laying of the cobblestones, the echo of a trumpet in the old town square. They all tell the story of Prague.
They do. The city quite literally sings its history, and I feel like we're singing along right now.
That's the magic of Prague. Every corner echoes a story. Every alley whispers a secret from the past. Writers like Kafka captured the spirit of the city with its complexities and its shadows.
It's like Prague is a living, breathing history book, inviting us to turn its pages one cobblestone at a time.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Those cobblestones have borne witness to revolutionary figures, great visionaries, and the common folk who are the heartbeat of this city.
Speaking of visionaries, Prague has always been a city of the arts. Composers like Dvořák and writers like Rilke have drawn inspiration from its enchanting streets.
Oh, and let's not forget about the Bohemian lifestyle that permeated through the city, bringing about a flair for the dramatic and a zest for life.
Prague does have a flair for the dramatic, doesn't it? Perhaps that's one of the reasons it's become such a popular filming location these days.
For sure, it's that blend of history, art, and ambiance that makes it a filmmaker's dream and our reality. Ah, but time is ticking, and we've got more enchanting tales to tell.
Like the thrilling and often surprising travel tips we have in store for our next segment. Stay tuned for those savvy insider tidbits that will make your future Prague adventure smooth and memorable.
So, get your notebooks ready, fellow travelers, because we're going to equip you with everything you need to glide through Prague like a seasoned local. Welcome back, wanderers. You're tuned in to Travel with Lara and Luca, where this segment is all about those all-important expert travel tips for Prague. Now, Luca, let's kick things off with timing. What's your golden rule for visiting the hot spots without the hot mess of a crowd? Morning golden hours, Lara. those precious moments right after the sun peeks out. Charles Bridge, Old Town, you'll have it to yourself. Almost feels like your personal time machine to the 14th century. A true Prague photography hack right there, folks. But don't tell everyone, or we'll have to find a new golden hour. Let's pivot to the wallet. How do you keep that travel budget tight in a city that's practically dripping with things to spend money on? Street food, Lara. It's not just about saving a few koruna, it's an experience. A klobasa, or that scrumptious trudelnik, will fill you up without emptying your pockets. And let's not forget those amazing Prague transport passes. Unlimited travel means limitless exploring while keeping your bank account safely in the green zone. Oh, speaking of green, you remember that park? The one where, yes, Letna Park. A cheap beer with a view that's worth $1 million. And pro tip, hitting up the grocery store for picnic goodies, that's living like a local. Now, Luca, no one wants to look like a deer in headlights, lost in translation. Any advice for bridging the language gap? My number one lifesaver.
Learn the magic words. Please, thank you. Hello, goodbye. Also, pivo. That's beer. Very important. You're halfway to being a local with just that. And you can charm your way through most situations with a smile and a dobry den. That's good day. Seriously, folks, Czechs really appreciate you trying their language, even if you butcher it, like Luca. Hey, well, at least my prominte sounds sincere when I'm apologizing for my terrible Czech. But while we're on communication, what's your take on staying connected, tech-wise? SIM cards and mobile data are cheap. Grab one at the airport and you've got the city in the palm of your hand. Google Maps, transport apps, all buzzing happily. Don't forget those life-saving offline map apps. You can navigate the labyrinth of Prague without Wi-Fi and still find the hidden gems tucked away in Malá Strana. Now, give me the best tip you've got for making the most of the Airbnb and hotel game. It's all about timing. Off-peak seasons like late autumn or early spring, you'll snag luxurious lodgings for hostel prices. Going shoulder season gives you a more authentic vibe too, less touristy. Now, Lara, spill on your best-kept travel secret for Prague. Hands down, local festivals. They aren't just for the tourists, you really get the pulse of the city. Music, dance, food, dive headfirst into Czech culture. All right, wise traveler, what's your final pearl of wisdom? This one's priceless. Patience. Prague's a city of layers. Stories unfold at every turn. Don't rush it. Soak in every cobblestone, every spire. I can hear the melancholy poetry coming on. But he's right, listeners. Take your time. Take it all in with patience and wonder. There's a whole world within Prague's city limits to discover. And on that note, it's a wrap for travel tips. Stick around for our next segment, where we'll whisk you away on side excursions that'll make you fall deeper in love with the Czech Republic, if that's even possible.
All right, Lara, with all the wonders nestled in Prague's heart, it's easy to forget there's a whole world beyond its spires.
True, but for those who feel the call of adventure, the Czech countryside is a treasure trove, just a day trip away. Let's whisk our listeners off to these nearby delights, shall we?
First stop, Kutna Hora. Silver mines turned Gothic glory. It's like stepping onto the set of a medieval epic.
And the centerpiece has to be the Sedlec ossuary, the Chapel of Bones, decorated with the skeletal remains of between 40,000 to 70,000 people. It's magnificently macabre.
Plus, it gives "I've got a bone to pick with you" a whole new context, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And for those a bit faint of heart, there's the beautiful Italian court. Once a royal residence and mint, now a fantastic gallery of historical coinage.
Oh, I can see our numismatists getting all a coin quiver. But let's turn the page to Český Krumlov. Renaissance and Baroque buildings curling around the Vltava River. It's like Prague's whimsical little sister.
Except this little sister has a bear moat. That's right, a moat with actual bears at the Krumlov Castle.
Then there's the Egon Schiele Art Centrum. You can't help but fall for the blend of contemporary art with Schiele's expressive works.
Pristine yet artsy, just how we like our day trips. Take a raft down the river, and it's a whole new perspective on that gorgeous skyline.
Speaking of splendid views, let's scale the heights of Karlstein Castle, King Charles IV's hideaway with those jewel-encrusted walls.
Ooh, to be a fly on those walls when they held the crown jewels of the Holy Roman Empire. But even without the jewels, the castle's frescoes alone are worth the trip.
Gem of Bohemian lore, that one. All right, time to lace up your hiking boots. We're taking a trek through Bohemian paradise, or Český Raj.
Towering rock formations like the Prague rocks make you wonder if you've stepped into a fairy tale. Perfect for climbers or those who love a good panoramic shot.
Oh, can you hear it, Lara? That's the sound of camera shutters clicking in sheer joy.
From granite peaks to tranquil trails, the natural beauty here would awe even the old masters of landscape painting.
Now, let's uncap something a little bottled up. Moravia isn't the only place for vineyards. Try the Melnik region, closer to Prague, where the confluence of the Elbe and Vltava rivers create fertile vineyard terraces.
A sip of Ludmila, an aromatic white as you overlook the rivers. It's practical wine poetry.
We'll toast to that. And for the hops enthusiasts, a brewery tour is just the frothy foray you need to explore Czech's beer beyond the Pilsner.
Velká Popovice and its famed Kozel awaits, with its brewing legacy and a chance to meet the iconic goats that grace their label.
All said and done, Prague's surroundings serve up slices of history, culture, and nature with the same pizzazz as the city center.
Pack a picnic, or better yet, swing by a village pub. Immerse yourself in the full, rustic charm of Czech country living.
And if you ever feel lost, remember, the best stories often start with, "I didn't mean to end up there, but..."
And those who wander might find themselves enchanted by the rolling hills, romantic ruins, and the stories whispered by the winds of Bohemia.
Lara, I think our wanderlust is catching.
It definitely is, and our next segment will ensure it sticks around. We've talked history, bites, and sights, but every seasoned traveler needs a trick or two up their sleeve.
Next up, we're going to be your guides to mastering the art of travel through Prague. Call it expert travel tips, or as I like to say, how to walk like a Praguer. And just like that, we're winding down our whimsical whirl through Prague. It's been an episode packed with spires, spirits, and of course, savory svíčková.
It certainly has, Luca. I've got to say, I'm a little sad our Prague adventure is coming to an end. But wasn't it amazing to wander through those cobblestone streets again, if only in our minds?
Exactly, Lara. But before we say Nashledanu to our listeners, let's take a moment to reflect on today's journey. What stood out to you the most from our Prague itinerary today?
Oh, tough question. But I think our chit-chat about those hidden gems really got to me. It's like revealing secret levels in your favorite video game. You think you know a place and then, bam, there's a whole other layer to discover.
Yes, the hidden courtyards, those whimsical art installations you stumbled upon that one evening.
Exactly, and staring into the eyes of the statues on Charles Bridge as if they were about to spill centuries of secrets. How about you, Luca?
For me, it's always the oddities, like taking a moment in our Weird Facts segment to appreciate the, well, stranger side of things. Ghost stories, quirky traditions, they add such rich texture to Prague's history.
They remind us that every city is a storybook, and some chapters are just delightfully bizarre. But all of this lore and legend isn't worth a hill of beans unless our listeners can make use of it, right?
That's where our nuggets of travel wisdom shine, Lara. Best times to visit attractions, the language tips, although I'm still not convinced my pronunciation isn't causing both amusement and confusion among the locals.
It's the effort that counts, Luca. And if nothing else, butchered language attempts are a foolproof icebreaker.
Ever the optimist. Now, I bet our listeners are eager to embark on their own Prague escapades, armed with insight from a pair of adorably chatty tour guides.
Charming, Luca. Very charming. And I hope our side excursions have inspired some plans for weekend jaunts to the Czech countryside. Prague's allure might be magnetic, but there's so much more to see just a train ride away.
Couldn't agree more. Kutná Hora's eerie beauty, the fairy tale vistas of Český Krumlov, they might rival Prague in the charm department. So, Lara, any final musings you'd like to leave our wanderlust-filled listeners with?
Simply this. Prague isn't just a place to check off your travel list. It's an experience to savor, a tapestry of history, mystery, art, and a touch of the absurd to be woven into your own life story.
Beautifully put. And for those of you planning a trip or just dreaming from the comfort of home, Prague is waiting to embrace you with open arms. and with a pint of the crispest beer, no less.
But every adventure has to come to an end, and so has this episode of Travel with Lara and Luca. Don't forget to share your experiences and questions with us so we can keep the conversation going and keep our community thriving.
Join us next time as we ruffle the pages of our passports and navigate to a brand new destination.
Pack your curiosity and your best walking shoes.
We'll lead, you follow. It's what we do best.
For now, we bid you in Prague a fond and heartfelt farewell. Stay adventurous, stay joyful.
And as always, stay curious, dear travelers. Till our next enchanting rendezvous. Na shledanou, Prague.